There is a question which I normally get from most of the web developers, and the issues about complaint from most of the end users of the web application that most web developers normally develop. Um, the issue is the experience of lazy loading or maybe poor performance of the web application. Performance in terms of how the website or the web application loads. Sometimes I know most of you normally experience, tu ina load pole 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 pole. That's a huge concern and a problem to maybe the investors who have hired you to develop the website, and now they end up experience this kind of thing. So, what are some of the things that you need to know as a web developer? Because I know most of you follow this channel. Maybe you are in this field of software developers or web development for that matter, and we learn and share together. So maybe if you're an expert, kindly share with us on the comment section what are some of the things that you normally think they might cause these ones, apart from whatever I'm going to share. And again, if you're an upcoming web developer, or maybe you have done your deployment, your first deployment, something like that, you can share your experience with us, at least maybe if it's a challenge or maybe your thoughts about these ones on the comment section. But on this video, I'll share my ideas or maybe my thoughts based on the experience for the few years I've been in the industry. Now, I would like to categorize these things into three categories. There are problems which occur on the front end, there are problems which are caused by poor backend, and there are problems which are caused by the web hosting company that you're using. Now, on the front end, there is one problem which, according to me, hiyo haikuhusu. And this is a scenario where you find that the end user, the internet connection or the internet service provider mwenye anam provide internet, it's a very slow internet connection. So you can't expect, maybe like for example, unasikianga mtu ako mashinani, something like that, and there is a poor network. If it is bad, then on that case, you cannot be able to help that person. They cannot complain your web application or your website is very, very slow. So that is something that is beyond your control. What they need to do is to look for a good, to change for the internet service provider, and they check on the status. At least hapo wanaweza kuambia kama wame experience na hii ni slow, bado na hii ingine ni slow, at least now it can become your concern. Now, the things that relate to how you develop the system, one is having large files. And when I'm talking about large files, I'm talking about the HTML web pages or the pages of your website, the ones that you're creating. And also, there are files like, for example, the images and videos which you're using on your website. Sometimes you'll find someone, because it's something that I normally come across, especially when you're doing code review or maybe I'm troubleshooting some stuff here and there on the some of my clients. You'll find that someone has written thousands of code in an HTML page with combined HTML. There is the CSS, there is JavaScript, there is maybe the PHP. It's also in there, and then you wonder, hi. Then at ungesoma tu kidogo how to separate these things, and how can you put all these things together, and how it is written. It looks very, very complex for that matter. So try as much as you can to write just few lines of code which are going to solve your problem. That's how you optimize the code, and it becomes very easy for you to sort out the issue. Apart from having large files like for the HTML and that is the code pages, the source code pages, there are images. Sometimes many people normally use image the way they got them from the camera. You normally need what we refer to as either video editing and photo editing, so that you can make the size of that photo to be a little bit less, even the video for that matter, because when you capture with a good camera which is going to give you quality, trust me, obvious, the file is going to be very, very huge. Like for example, in a photo, you might find a photo is having over 600 MBs, and you can imagine you are putting a 600 MBs of photo, which is far much bigger compared to the pages that you've created for the HTML, CSS, and other source code combined. So you wonder how it's going to load, and you start complaining your website is loading very slow. I'm not saying it's not good to capture photos with camera. Actually, it's the best thing, but you need some fine touch to a little bit make the size of the photos and videos to be a little bit less, and something which is easy to load for that matter. Now, apart from having the large files, there is another thing which is the kind of how am I going to call this one? There are websites which are developed using libraries, and others which are developed, the front end is developed using libraries and what we refer to as CMS, that is content management systems, like for example WordPress. Remember WordPress, we normally work with themes, plugins, and so forth and so forth and so forth. So all these things makes your website to be very slow. When you compare someone who has written their a simple, maybe like one page website, just pure HTML and some JavaScript on CSS, that website, how it loads is very, very fast compared to someone who has developed the system using what we refer to as WordPress. I'm not saying people should not use WordPress. Yes, WordPress is the best. It's a non-coding tool that you can use. You don't need to learn coding so that you can create a website. People use them. It gives you the best design, the best appearance of the website, and so forth. But when it comes to loading speed, it's going to be less compared to someone who has written the code by themselves. Again, when we talk about libraries, like for example React and other libraries that you know, those libraries normally contain a lot of dependencies, and these dependencies are other things which normally makes your application. So when you look at libraries and when you look at CMS, you'll find that they normally have a lot of dependencies. For the WordPress, you have got the plugins and so forth, which all of these things have to be loaded so that the website appearance can be one of the best. And it will require a lot of, maybe if you are doing caching and so forth, it will require a lot of memory and stuff like that. So in that case, I would suggest if you're building or developing a simple web application, then I can say it's good for you to code the system. It's going to give you the best experience. But now for big organization where you find that we are developing complex application, like for this matter, something like to do like Facebook, or maybe something like Twitter, Instagram, and so forth, you'll realize that using React is one of the best. Like for example, Facebook is developed using React. So in this case, to manage this kind of stuff, or to maintain this kind of system, then React will come in, and it's one of the best. I can't complain on that. But there are some scenario where you find that like I read an article where, even I think I saw a video about that one, where a company like Netflix, they were some kind of doing some of the code which was done in React. They were kind of simplifying it using the HTML, because there are some complex things or maybe simple things which do not need to for you to use complex stuff. The beauty about React is that React is kind of a synchronized thing, where you find that whatever is happening on the back end, you normally see it on the front end in real time. And there are tools which normally allow that. So when you learn React, you'll get to understand deeper on that area. Now, that is on the front end issues. So as I said, front end issues can be large file, and the kind of tools that you've used to create the front end. That is, it can be the CMS, that is content management system, like WordPress, or maybe when you talk about React, which is a library, among others. So those are some of the things which will make your web application to be very, very slow. And in this case, when I'm talking about being slow, like React and WordPress, especially when you're hosting in a shared host, the experience is going to be very, very worse compared to someone who has hosted on cloud. I'll touch on that when I talk about web hosting part. Now, let's get to the backend. What are some of the things which normally happen on the backend, and they might end up causing your web application performance to be very slow, or be very, very poor? The core thing, the core thing that I always keep on telling all the developers when I meet them, and the first question that I normally ask, the first thing I'd like to see is the database design. When you have a poor database design, Like for example, a database which is not well normalized. Like for example, I normally come across databases where you find that there is a table with over 50 columns, and you wonder what is this guy doing with all these columns. So in such a case, expect the website to be very, very slow in loading, and even the kind of queries that you're going to write, they are going to be very, very complex, and they will take time to load. For that matter, they can even start creating what we refer to as deadlocks, database deadlocks or something like that. So database design is one of the most important things that you need to check on the backend. If you have a poor database design, then I can tell you for sure it's not going to be one of the best. So once you have a good database design, obvious, it makes the kind of APIs that you're going to write to be a little bit easy, not that complex. They don't look like kind of a spaghetti, complex queries and so forth. It doesn't, which doesn't make sense. So in this case, this is going to assist you a lot. Have a good database design with well normalized tables with good relationship. Then from there, then you'll be able to create very nice API endpoints. And after that, it means the next thing is to optimize your code. Because sometimes, yes, you might end up having all this good, but when it comes to writing the code, you're writing too many if, else if, blah, 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 loops, continuous, queries and within another query and so forth, which obvious it will make your web application to be very, very slow. So try to optimize your code just by writing simple lines of code, like 3 lines of code, which can make your job done. Things like arrow functions, when you check on arrow function shortcodes when it comes to PHP and so forth, which is going to simplify a lot. So those are some of the things, and even the logic, how you are approaching the logic of your system. Kind of design and craft the logics in a way that it's kind of going to be one of the simple things and the easiest thing to execute very fast and solve the problem that you want to be solved. Another thing, there is something else which happens on the backend. The kind of programming languages that you're using on the backend determines a lot the kind of speed that you're going to experience. Why am I saying that? Sometimes we normally say a programming language is just but a tool, but I can tell you for sure the kind of web application that you are developing, it can be a complex system. So if you end up using a language like maybe, because we normally have different categories of programming language, we have got what we refer to as compiled language, and we have got what we refer to as interpreted languages. Interpreted languages, it is just something like Python, we have got JavaScript, we have got PHP. Those are good examples of interpreted languages, which are kind of a little bit slower compared to the compiled languages. Compiled languages are languages like Java, C++, I think C Sharp, and yeah, those kind of languages. Those are the best languages because they run on the machine level, almost the machine level. What do I mean by that? Like assuming when you go to somewhere remote like China and you find someone speaking your mother tongue, Kikamba hapo polepole, Kikuyu, Kijaluo, and so forth, how are you going to feel it? You're going to enjoy it. It's going to be one of the best experience for you. So the same way, when you are trying to execute a programming language or a code that you've written using a low-level language, then the kind of experience is going to be very fast because the language is not trying as much as it can to kind of understand and interpret this kind of thing, because these are languages which are almost to the level of the machine. So in this case, just assume a mobile app which is developed using JavaScript and another one which is using Java itself. It's going to be one of the best. And that's why I recommend, if it is a big organization like bank, big corporates and so forth, when you're developing these kind of systems, then you don't have any option. And that's why I keep on saying Java will always be for white collar jobs, for the people who would like, for the developers who would want to work for the corporates and so forth. Then Java is the programming language. C Sharp and C++, those are the kind of languages that you need to kind of study. But if you are talking about just the normal freelancing, then kuja hapa tuendelee kuchapa mambo ya PHP, JavaScript and Python for that matter. So that's another thing you need to know. the kind of language that you're using on the back end, it will determine a lot, because you can imagine if you're developing a web application which is very complex and you expect to get a high traffic, then I can tell you, my friend, the best language that you can have beneath that front end is a good compiled language like Java, for that matter, and it's going to serve you. Now, let's go to the next and the last part, which is some of the problems which are caused by the web hosting companies. The web hosting companies can give you some problems, because sometimes they can give you limited resources. And when I mean limited resources, can be RAMs, the CPU, something like that. And this kind of problem that is normally experienced by most of people who normally use shared hosting. So in such a case, don't expect too much. That is one problem that you'll experience for that matter. There is another thing, another problem which is caused by the web hosting companies. And I would say, like, for example, when you compare the shared hosting, the VPS, and what we refer to as cloud is always the best. It's going to serve you well. So be it maybe you have a small application and you're hosting it on a cloud, then you're going to have a good experience, even though the bill is going to go a little bit up, because the resources are normally given based on the demand, and obvious, it means more billing for that matter. Now, there is another problem which happens on the with the web hosting companies. There is what we refer to as the location of your web server. Ulionanga sometimes back in 2015, Safaricom, when they said M-Pesa is back home. When they meant that, it's a project which was intended to kind of create web servers which are going to host the M-Pesa application here in Kenya, instead of outside the country, which it used to be German. Even though there are some services which I think they normally host on something like Amazon and so forth. For the bank, most of the web hosting companies, they normally use a lot of cloud. So in this case, the point that I'm trying to put across is that when you have your web servers within or in a small area coverage, like for example, servers which are within Kenya, then it's going to be very easy, because maybe assuming my clients are in Kenya, then automatically it means if I host that application here in Kenya, the connection and kind of interlinking, like the connection between, because what happens is that when a client does a request, the request has to go all the way to where the server is. So if we have a server in German and we want to send money to someone, then it means that request has to go all the way to German and then come back and so forth. So to avoid that is to try to kind of host with the companies which you know that they are hosting they are offering the services within Kenya. So it's going to be very good, although it's very, very expensive for that matter. I cannot recommend something like that in most cases. But if you don't have another, so it may be the kind of product that you're dealing with, it's very, very important. Then that is one of the things that you need to consider to do that. Then the last one is what we refer to as load balancing. And load balancing is where you find that, assuming, like, for example, the M-Pesa has got 34 million users. That is Safaricom, that's 34 million subscribers. When you go to Facebook right now, it has got, as we talk right now, in real time, it is experiencing over 3 billion users requests. Now you can imagine. Again, we have got other companies like WhatsApp and so forth, which are like 1 point something like that. But I think Facebook is the one which experiences a lot of requests and so forth. So you can imagine, if all those requests are going to one server, is it going to manage? It is not. So in this case, that's why we normally have something we call load balancing. We have got multiple web servers which are getting these requests and then giving resources to the people, and at the end of the day, extract whatever it's going to be extracted from the application and give it back to the user. So load balancing is very, very important. For example, like for Safaricom, for those who have interacted with M-Pesa Daraja API, then you realize that when you go through the documentation, there are the IP addresses which we normally use for whitelisting. And for that matter, we can say that these over 12 IP addresses are for the servers that we normally use to So that is it. Let me close it at that point. See you on the next one, and thank you.